My name is Kayla Whitaker. I was 35 when this happened, and I'm a plumber in Columbus, Ohio. I've been with Morrison Plumbing for almost 10 years, making around $55,000 a year, enough to keep our little rental in the Hilltop area afloat and still stash away every spare dollar toward the dream of buying a place in Grove City. My boyfriend, Noah, works as a nurse at a family clinic on Broad Street. He's the calm in our house, the kind of man who can walk into a room full of tension and somehow lower the temperature just by speaking. And most days, that softness is exactly what keeps me steady. But when it comes to my son, soft doesn't live there anymore. My son, Kyle, was 8 that summer. He was obsessed with cars and technology in the way only a kid can be, pure, innocent, and relentless. Every time we drove past the Tesla dealership on Sawmill Road, he'd twist around in his seat and plead like it was a matter of survival. "Mom, please, just 5 minutes. I just want to see one up close." He could recite features of a Model Y like other kids recited dinosaur names. Autopilot, smart summon, range estimates, cameras, lane assist. He learned it all from YouTube, eyes wide, heart open, believing the world was built out of miracles. And I didn't know yet that his innocent obsession would make him a target. Because my younger sister, Danny, was 27 and still living, like consequences were something that only happened to other people. Danny was a bartender at Buffalo Wild Wings near Ohio State Stadium. She lived with our parents in Whitehall, 15 minutes from me, but sometimes it felt like a whole different universe. Danny spent money like it was cursed if it stayed in her account too long. Beer, parties, friends who showed up when there was something to celebrate and disappeared when there wasn't. I love my sister. I really did. I'd protected her my whole life. But I also knew the truth. Danny hadn't grown up. Not really. That's why my parents did something that still makes my jaw clench when I say it out loud. They chipped in $28,000 so Danny could buy a $58,000 Tesla Model Y. They told me it was motivation, a push, a way to get her to settle down. And I tried to see it that way. 10 years ago, when I was just starting out, my dad helped me get a used Ford F-150. That truck gave me a shot at my first contracts. So no, I wasn't jealous. Not even when I saw the white Tesla sitting in their driveway like a trophy. I wasn't jealous. I was scared. The barbecue that Saturday afternoon was to celebrate the car, when I heard Danny's bartender friends were coming too. Guys who drank like their bodies were built out of empty cans. I felt a small worry prick the back of my neck. But I pushed it down. Just a family get-together, right? What could go wrong? When Noah and I drove Kyle over to my parents' place, Kyle was humming in the back seat, rattling off specs like he was narrating a documentary. "Mom, did you know the battery can go over 300 miles on one charge? And it can park itself. Like, it literally parks itself." Noah glanced at me and smiled, shaking his head like, "How did we create this tiny little engineer?" I smiled back. I had no idea that in a few hours, I'd be barefoot in the street, tasting fear like metal in my mouth. The moment we pulled up, the Tesla was centered in the driveway, gleaming in the summer light. Danny stood beside it holding a Budweiser, laughing too loudly, explaining something to 2 neighbors like she'd personally invented electricity. Kyle unbuckled so fast I barely had time to turn off the engine. He flew out of the car and ran straight toward the Tesla, eyes wide like he'd seen a spaceship land. Danny bent down, ruffled his hair, and said proudly, "You like your aunt's car? Pretty cool, right? I'll let you sit inside and check it out." I reached Kyle and put a hand on his shoulder. My voice was gentle, but firm. "Look, baby, don't touch anything." Danny laughed and slapped my shoulder like I was being dramatic. "Kayla, you've got to see this. Autopilot, smart summon, cameras everywhere. This thing drives itself. I just sit back and relax." I nodded, offered her a few compliments, the way you do when you're trying to keep peace in a room that's always one wrong word away from exploding. The backyard was full by then, maybe a dozen people. The grill was sizzling. The air smelled like charcoal smoke and sticky barbecue sauce. Plastic chairs dotted the lawn. A cooler was packed with beer. My dad stood at the grill with tongs like a king holding a scepter. My mom moved between kitchen and patio with the same steady competence she'd carried our whole family on for decades. Dinner was normal, almost nice. Kyle ate, but his eyes kept drifting toward the Tesla like it was calling to him. After we ate, Noah and I went inside to help my mom clean up. Our routine. He washed, I dried, my mom packed leftovers. And through the kitchen window, I saw Danny out front with her friends, circling the Tesla like worshippers around an altar. She'd had at least 4 beers by then. I could tell by the glassy look in her eyes, the way her laughter punched out too hard, too loud. I heard fragments of argument through the window, self-driving safety, accidents, headlines. Then I heard a familiar mocking voice, one of Danny's friends, the kind who likes stirring fires just to watch people burn. This thing's gonna be on the news the second the driver falls asleep. Autopilot kills people. Danny snapped upright. Even from inside, I saw her pride flare. You don't know anything, she slurred. Tesla is safer than any of you idiots driving by hand. I'll prove it. I rolled my eyes, drying another plate, trying to pretend it was harmless. Just talk. Just drunk bragging. 5 minutes later, a scream ripped through the afternoon so sharp my blood turned to ice. Kyle's driving the car! The plate slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. I didn't even look down, because my body was already moving, running, before my mind could catch up. I burst out the back door, around the side of the house, and when I hit the front yard, I saw the white Tesla rolling down the street, slowly, like a nightmare taking its time. And behind the windshield, barely visible over the steering wheel, was my son's tiny head. Kyle, in the driver's seat. My heart didn't just drop. It detonated. Danny stood behind this car with her friends, a beer still in her hand, smiling like she was watching a magic trick. Phones were up. Someone was recording. Someone whistled. And I heard a grown man yell, laughing, "Look at that! The kid's driving a Tesla!" My voice tore out of me, raw and cracking. Kyle! Danny turned, waved at me like I'd walked into a party late. Chill out, she shouted. It's self-driving. It's totally safe. I didn't hear anything after that except my own heartbeat, pounding like thunder inside my skull. I ran, barefoot. The asphalt burned my feet, but pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered, except the distance between my child and disaster. Up ahead, the road curved slightly where the lane markings were faded. I saw the steering wheel twitch, left, right. Kyle's small face turned toward the window, excited 1 second and arrived the next. Mom, he cried, it's turning by itself. I can't do anything. The car swerved toward trash cans, corrected, then drifted toward a parked Silverado. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. 30 feet, 2015. Kyle's sobbing reached me like a knife. I'm scared. I want to get out. I reached the driver's door, grabbed the handle, yanked. The Tesla's sensors caught me. Emergency braking kicked in. Tires screeched. The car jerked to a stop just feet from the Silverado. I lunged inside, slammed the gear into park, stabbed at the touchscreen with shaking fingers until the system shut down. Kyle was curled up in the seat, face soaked, hands still locked around the steering wheel, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I lifted him out and held him against my chest so tight I could feel his heart galloping through his ribs. Are you okay? My voice was hoarse. Are you okay? Kyle clung to me and sobbed. I was scared, Mom. I was so scared. I don't want to drive anymore. Noah appeared beside us. I don't even remember him running out, but suddenly he was there, wrapping both of us in his arms, his hands trembling in a way I'd never seen. My son was safe, but something inside me wasn't. I handed Kyle to Noah, watched my boyfriend cradle him like fragile glass, and then I turned around. Danny stood about 50 feet away, her smile fading into confusion, like she truly didn't understand what she'd done. I walked toward her, slow at first, because if I ran, I was afraid I'd do something I couldn't take back. But when I got close enough to see the beer still dripping down the side of the can in her hand, when I saw her friends still holding their phones, when I heard one of them mutter, "Dude, she's overreacting," everything in me snapped. I didn't say a word. I just hit her. One punch straight into her face, right there in our parents' front yard. And the dry crack of it felt like the sound of my childhood breaking in half. Danny collapsed onto the grass, blood spilling from her nose, staring up at me like I'd become a stranger. My parents burst out of the house shouting, confused, terrified. Noah stood behind me, holding Kyle, who was still shaking. And in that moment, while my sister lay bleeding and my son cried against Noah's shoulder, I realized something cold and final. This wasn't just a stupid stunt. This was the beginning of the biggest nightmare our family had ever lived. For a few seconds after I hit Danny, the entire world froze. No screaming, no shouting, not even the usual background noise of summer, no lawnmower hum, no distant dogs barking, no kids on bikes. Just the sound of my son's crying, muffled against Noah's shoulder. Danny was on the grass like she'd been dropped there, one hand clamped over her nose. Blood slipped between her fingers and dotted the green like someone had flicked red paint across the lawn. Her friends, 5 or 6 of them, stood in a crooked semicircle, phones still raised, recording out of habit or fear. No one moved. No one dared. My dad's voice finally cut through the silence. Kayla, what the hell is going on? I turned so fast my neck stung. My parents were standing on the porch, my mom still wearing her apron like she'd been yanked out of the kitchen mid-breath. My dad's face was pale at first, until he saw Kyle trembling in Noah's arms. Then the color rushed into his skin. I pointed at Danny. My whole body shook so hard I could barely speak. She put Kyle in the driver's seat, I said, each word coming out like I had to drag it up from my chest. She turned on autopilot and let the car roll down the street like it was a joke. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad took a step forward, slow, like he didn't trust his own legs. Danny tried to sit up, voice slurred, thick with blood and humiliation. I was just proving. Dad's face snapped. Proving what? He roared. I had never heard that sound come out of him. My father was a calm man, a quiet man, the kind of person who didn't waste words because he believed presence was enough. But that roar didn't sound like presence. It sounded like rage that had been waiting decades for the right reason. Danny flinched and tried again, desperate. It was safe. It was... My mom appeared behind Dad with something in her hands. A full bucket of ice from the cooler. No warning, no speech, no dramatic countdown. She dumped it over Danny's head. Ice and water slammed into her face, splashing into the grass, scattering cubes across the yard like broken teeth. Danny screamed and staggered, soaked from hair to shoes. Blood from her nose mixed with the cold water and ran in thin red streaks down her white polo. And my mom, sweet, small, usually gentle, stepped forward and pointed like a judge. Say one more word, she said, voice low and deadly, and I'll push that car into the Scioto River myself and call the cops. Danny stood there shivering, lips trembling, eyes wide. For the first time in her life, she looked like she finally understood fear wasn't something you watched on a screen. But I wasn't done, because my son was still crying, and my hands were still shaking, and I could still see the Tesla rolling, like a slow-moving coffin, while those idiots laughed behind it. I pulled my phone out. Noah's eyes widened. Kayla. I didn't look back. If I looked at him, I might soften, and if I softened, I might forget what this moment needed to become. I dialed 911. Danny's voice cracked. Are you serious? I stared past her, out toward the street where the Tesla still sat crooked, innocent-looking, like it hadn't just tried to kill my child. Yes, I said. Then I spoke into the phone with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. I need to report child endangerment. A family member put my 8-year-old son in the driver's seat of a moving vehicle and turned on autopilot. There's video. Behind me, I heard Danny's wet footsteps stumble closer. Kayla, don't, she pleaded. I didn't mean Kyle wasn't... I didn't turn around. You should stop talking, I said, loud enough for her to hear. Everything you say can be used against you. That shut her up. For 15 minutes, time stretched like a punishment. My mom took Kyle inside and sat him on the old couch in the living room, rocking him the way she used to rock me when I was little. Noah stayed close, his hand on Kyle's back, murmuring soft reassurances. I stayed on the porch. My feet started to burn, finally catching up with what my panic had ignored. The skin was scraped, tiny stones embedded in the soles, blood smeared across my toes, but the pain in my feet was nothing compared to the pain in my chest. Danny sat on the side steps, soaked, nose swollen, head hanging like a scolded child. My dad stood a few yards away from her with his arms crossed. Not comforting, not yelling, just staring at her the way you stare at something you don't recognize anymore. When the sirens finally came, it felt like the neighborhood itself exhaled. 2 Columbus police cars turned onto the street, lights flashing blue and red across the houses like a warning. 4 officers stepped out. One of them, tall, salt and pepper hair, confident posture, walked up to me first. His name tag read SG. Williams. He looked at the scene. My scraped feet, Danny's bloody face, my parents' stunned expressions, and then his eyes landed on Noah holding my son in the doorway. You the one who called? He asked. Yes, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I told him everything. Not just the big parts, the ugly parts too. The laughing, the filming, the way Danny waved at me like I was the problem. Sergeant Williams listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once, slow and heavy. All right, he said. We're going to take statements. Everyone separate. The next hour felt like being dissected while still alive. An officer sat with me at the patio table and asked questions that made my stomach twist. Did the child touch any controls? Did the adult instruct him to do anything? Was the adult intoxicated? Was the vehicle in motion on a public road? Yes, 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 yes. Danny sat near the garage with another officer, shoulders curled inward, voice so quiet the officer had to lean in and ask her to repeat herself. Her friends were questioned one by one they handed over their videos. Not out of morality, out of fear. Because the second the sirens arrived, they realized this wasn't just a crazy story anymore. This was evidence. Around 7 p.m., Sergeant Williams gathered everyone together. The grill had gone cold. The beer in the cooler sat untouched now, like it had turned poisonous. Sergeant Williams held his phone in one hand, his notepad in the other. "I've reviewed the videos," he said. Danny's face drained. Then Sergeant Williams looked at her, really looked, and asked the question that made my throat tighten. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "Kayla struck you. Do you want to press assault charges?" Silence. Danny swallowed. Her eyes flickered toward me, then dropped to the grass. After a long moment, she shook her head. "No," she whispered. I deserved it." That simple sentence hit me harder than any punch. Because Danny never admitted fault. Not when she wrecked my mom's car at 19 and blamed the rain. Not when she got fired once for drinking on shift and blamed the manager. Not when she broke a neighbor's window with a bottle and claimed it must have been someone else. But now she was soaked, bloody, humiliated, and finally honest. Sergeant Williams wrote something down, then turned to me. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "you have the right to press charges against your sister. This is child endangerment under Ohio law. With this video evidence, the case would likely succeed. Penalty could include up to 6 months in jail and fines." My mouth went dry. I looked at Danny. She looked awful. Not just physically, though her nose was swelling fast, but in a deeper way, like someone had finally seen herself clearly and hated the reflection. If I pressed charges, it could destroy her future. A criminal record, a permanent stain, jobs gone, opportunities gone, a wall built around her life that she'd spend years trying to climb. And yet, if I didn't press charges, was I teaching her that she could do anything and still be rescued by family? Was I just handing her another free pass? My heart pounded, loud enough I could hear it. Noah stepped up beside me quietly. His hand brushed mine, not gripping, not pushing, just there. A reminder, you can be furious and still think. He leaned close, voice low, meant only for me. "Whatever you decide," he said, "make sure it's something you can live with when you wake up at 3 a.m. That sentence landed like a weight. I stared at Danny. Then I inhaled slowly, tasting smoke and summer and the bitter aftershock of fear. "I need time," I told Sergeant Williams. "I'm not pressing charges right now." Danny's head jerked up. Hope flashed in her eyes, sharp and desperate. Sergeant Williams nodded like he'd expected that answer. But then he stepped toward Danny and lowered his voice into something colder. "You're lucky," he said. "Not everyone gets this kind of mercy. Next time, you won't be this lucky." Danny nodded rapidly, tears mixing with water on her face. "Yes, sir," she croaked. The officers packed up their notes. The lights disappeared down the street. The sirens faded until the neighborhood sank back into crickets and dusk. And when the last police car turned the corner, I realized something that made my stomach twist again. The cops were gone, but the consequences were just beginning. I took Noah and Kyle home without speaking to Danny, without speaking to my parents. Not because I didn't love them, but because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Kyle fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home, exhausted from crying. Noah held my hand the whole way, his thumb rubbing circles into my palm like he could erase what happened. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to my son breathing in the next room, listening to Noah shifting beside me, unable to sleep either. And one question repeated in my head until dawn, relentless as a drip in a pipe I couldn't fix. Did I do the right thing by letting her walk away without charges? Because 2 days later, when the doorbell rang and I opened the door, my sister stood there with red eyes, wrinkled clothes, and a kind of brokenness I'd never seen before. And she didn't come to beg me. She came to beg Noah. When I opened the door and saw Danny standing there, my first instinct was to slam it shut. She looked like hell. Her nose was still swollen, bruised yellow and purple at the edges. Her hair was greasy, pulled back in a way that said she hadn't slept or showered much since that day. Her clothes were wrinkled like she'd slept in them, maybe on a couch, maybe on the floor. And her eyes were red, not the angry red I was used to, but the hollow kind. The kind you see when someone's been crying so long they've run out of tears. I crossed my arms over my chest, blocking the doorway with my body. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice was flat, empty. I didn't trust it to hold anything softer. Danny swallowed. Her gaze slid past me, into the house. "I need to talk to Noah." That stopped me cold. "Not you, not my sister, not please forgive me." No. She wanted Noah. For half a second, anger flared so hot I almost laughed. You don't get to pick who you talk to, I said. You should leave. But before I could step forward and close the door, Noah appeared behind me. I felt him before I saw him, his calm presence filling the space like he always did when things were about to break. He rested a hand lightly on my shoulder. It's okay, he said gently. Let her speak. I wanted to argue. God, I wanted to argue. To scream that she'd already said too much, that she'd already done enough. But I stepped aside. Danny walked onto the porch slowly, like she was afraid the ground might give out under her feet. She didn't sit, didn't lean on the railing. She just stood there, hands clenched at her sides, breathing like each breath cost her something. Then, without warning, she dropped. Both knees hit the concrete with a dull, ugly sound that made my stomach twist. Danny, I started. But she didn't look at me. She looked up at Noah. Her shoulders shook. Her head bowed so low her forehead almost touched the porch. I know I'm stupid, she said, her voice cracking so badly I barely understood her. I know I'm impulsive. I didn't think. I didn't think about Kyle. I didn't think about Kayla. I didn't think about anyone but myself and my stupid pride. Her breath hitched. I swear, I'll do anything to make this right. Anything. Just tell me what to do. I took a step forward without thinking. She was still my sister. Seeing her kneeling like that, humiliated, exposed, it twisted something painful in my chest. But Noah lifted his hand slightly, stopping me. Not harshly, not angrily, just decisively. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't cold. That scared me more. Danny, he said calmly, an apology doesn't fix what you did. She nodded desperately. I know, I just... You risked a child's life, Noah continued. Not a stranger, your nephew. And you laughed while you did it. Each word landed carefully, like he was building something solid and heavy in the air between them. You don't need to say sorry again, he said. You need to change. Danny looked up, eyes wide and wet. Tell me how. Noah glanced at me for just a second. I didn't know what he saw in my face. Rage, fear, love, exhaustion. But whatever it was, he nodded to himself. Then he looked back at Danny. You leave, he said. The word hit like a slap. Danny blinked. Leave? You get out of here, Noah continued, voice steady. Out of this life. Away from the people you keep hurting. You go somewhere far enough that you can't fall back into the same habits. My heart started pounding again. For 6 months, Jan, he said. No partying, no excuses, no showing up when you feel lonely. You write to Kyle if you want, but that's it. Danny's lips trembled. And then, Noah said, we'll see who you are. Silence stretched across the porch. I watched my sister's face as she absorbed every word. This wasn't jail. This wasn't police punishment. This was worse. This was exile. Finally, she nodded. Slow, heavy, like she was agreeing to something she knew would hurt. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. She stood up shakily, wiping her face with her sleeve. She didn't ask for money, didn't ask for a ride, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just turned and walked down the steps. I watched her go, my chest tight, my thoughts tangled. At the end of the driveway, she stopped and looked back once. Not at me, at the house, at the life she'd nearly destroyed. Then she turned the corner and disappeared. I thought that was the hardest part. I was wrong. The first week after Danny left, no one heard from her. My parents called every night, voices tight with worry. Have you heard anything? My mom asked again and again. No, I said. And I meant more than just the word. The second week was worse. By the third, the first letter arrived. A plain white envelope, no return address, just a postmark from Houston, Texas. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Kyle, I'm very far away. I'm trying to become a better person. I love you. Aunt Danny. Kyle ran to me with the letter, eyes wide. Mom, he asked, where did Aunt Danny go? I knelt and pulled him into my arms. She went to learn how to be a grown-up, I said quietly. The letters kept coming, every 2 or 3 weeks. Different postmarks, different places. Houston, McAllen. A small town in Arizona I had to Google. The letters were never long, never dramatic, never begging. Just small moments. Today, I helped a kid learn how to tie his shoes. I shared a meal with someone who had nothing. I taught a little boy how to kick a soccer ball. He reminded me of you. No apologies. No explanations. No pressure. Noah kept the letters in an old shoebox on Kyle's bookshelf. I didn't read them at first. Every time I tried, my hands shook too much. At night, when the house was quiet, I still saw the car rolling. Still heard Kyle crying. 6 months felt impossibly far away. And yet, time kept moving. Life settled into a new, uneasy rhythm. Kyle stopped flinching when cars passed by. Noah held me on nights when sleep refused to come. And slowly, against my will, a question began to grow in the back of my mind. What if this time she really meant it? Exactly 6 months after the day Danny knelt on my porch, my phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Sunday. It was my mom. Her voice was trembling. "She's back," she said. "Kayla, you need to come here right now, and you need to prepare yourself." My heart started racing. Prepare myself for what? But my mom didn't answer. She just hung up. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than it ever had. Every red light stretched. Every mile marker crawled past like it was dragging something heavy behind it. Noah sat beside me, silent, one hand wrapped tightly around mine. Kyle was in the back seat clutching the shoebox of letters like it was something fragile, something sacred. No one spoke, because none of us knew what prepare yourself actually meant. Was Danny hurt? Arrested? Broken in some new, irreversible way? By the time we pulled onto Whitehall Drive, my heart was pounding so hard it made my ears ring. My parents' house looked the same. Same siding, same porch swing creaking gently in the morning breeze. Same front yard where blood had soaked into the grass 6 months ago. But the air felt different. Heavier. I stepped inside first. And then I saw her. Danny stood in the middle of the living room, hands folded in front of her like she was trying to take up less space. She was thinner, noticeably so. Her skin was darker, weathered by sun and wind. There were faint scars on her hands I didn't recognize. Her jeans were faded, her white t-shirt plain and worn, her sneakers frayed at the edges. She didn't look like someone who'd been partying. She looked like someone who'd been surviving. But that wasn't what made me stop breathing. It was the child holding her hand. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, brown skin, curly black hair, big, wary eyes that scanned the unfamiliar room like a small animal looking for an exit. When he noticed me staring, he shifted closer to Danny, half hiding behind her leg. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father stood frozen, coffee cup forgotten in his grip. Kyle let out a small gasp behind me. Danny swallowed, then lifted her head. "Hi," she said softly. Her voice was deeper, slower, steadier. "This is Mateo." No one spoke. "I'm in the process of adopting him," she added. The room went silent in a way that felt almost holy. My mom's knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. Not the sharp, panicked crying from 6 months ago, but something else, something overwhelmed. My dad set his coffee down with shaking hands and stared at Danny like he was seeing her for the first time. Danny began to explain. After leaving Columbus, she'd gone south, farther than she'd ever gone before. She volunteered at a refugee children's center near the border. Thousands of kids passed through. Kids who had crossed deserts. Kids who had lost parents. Kids who'd learned fear before they learned language. Mateo was one of them. His parents had died during the journey north. He'd arrived alone, no family, no one to claim him. "He wouldn't let go of me," Danny said quietly. "The first day, he just grabbed my hand. And every time I tried to walk away, he cried." She paused, breathing carefully. "At first I was terrified," she admitted. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to take care of anyone. But then I realized this was it. This was my chance to actually be responsible, not in theory, in reality." She told us about the paperwork, the interviews, the months of waiting, the nights she barely slept because Mateo woke crying from nightmares he couldn't explain. Mateo tugged on her hand and looked up at her. "Dad," he said softly, his English careful and slow, "this is home?" My mother broke. She crossed the room and wrapped both of them in her arms, sobbing into Danny's shoulder. My dad stepped forward and placed a hand on Danny's back, squeezing once, hard. Kyle wriggled free from Noah and ran forward. "Aunt Danny," he shouted, "you kept writing me letters. I kept all of them." Danny smiled then. The first real smile I'd seen in 6 months. She knelt down so Mateo could see Kyle properly. "This is your cousin," she said. "Kyle." Kyle tilted his head. "Hi. Do you like soccer?" Mateo nodded shyly. And just like that, the weight in the room shifted. Noah stood beside me, his eyes wet but calm. He squeezed my hand. I took a step forward. Danny looked up at me, uncertain, waiting. I searched her face for the old signs. Defensiveness, arrogance, excuses. They weren't there. "Have you really changed?" I asked quietly. Danny didn't rush to answer. "I don't know if I'll ever be done changing," she said, "but I'm trying, every day. Not because I want forgiveness, but because he deserves a better parent than who I used to be." She looked down at Mateo. Something in my chest loosened. I opened my arms, and after a second of hesitation, my sister stepped into them. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Today, Danny doesn't bartend anymore. She works full-time with the same refugee organization where she met Mateo. She sold the Tesla before she ever left Ohio and donated every dollar to the center. My parents say the money they put into that car didn't buy them a mature daughter, but it brought them a grandson. And for them, that was enough. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Apologies don't mean anything without action. Change does. And sometimes rock bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning. 6 months after Danny came back into our lives, I realized something uncomfortable. The hardest part wasn't forgiving her. It was living with the memory of what almost happened. Some nights, long after the house went quiet, I still saw it. The white Tesla rolling forward, my son's tiny hands locked around a steering wheel he couldn't control, the sound of my own scream tearing out of my chest. Trauma doesn't vanish just because someone changes. It lingers. It reshapes you. And it reshaped me too. Danny moved into a small apartment near my parents' house in Whitehall. Nothing fancy, no decorations except children's drawings taped crookedly to the fridge. Mateo slept in a tiny bedroom with a second-hand bed and a dinosaur blanket my mom bought on her first shopping trip as a grandma again. Every weekend, Kyle and Mateo ran circles around my parents' backyard. 2 boys, one fearless, one cautious. Kyle taught Mateo how to ride a bike. Mateo taught Kyle how to slow down and listen. Watching them together was strange, because sometimes when I looked at Mateo, I didn't see the child Danny saved. I saw the child she could have lost forever if my son hadn't survived. And I think Danny saw that too. She never raised her voice around children, never drank, never laughed too loudly anymore. She checked doors twice, counted heads constantly, held Mateo's hand like the world might steal him if she let go. Once, while Noah and I were sitting on my parents' porch watching the kids play, Danny sat beside me quietly. "I think about it every day," she said. "What I did. I don't want you to think I forgot." I nodded. "I don't," she swallowed. "And I don't want you to pretend it didn't happen." That honesty mattered. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't pretending the past never existed. It's choosing not to let it poison the future. The Tesla never came back. Danny sold it before she left Columbus, just like she said she would. Every dollar went to the refugee center. My parents never asked for the money back. They said that car taught them a lesson too, that money can enable destruction just as easily as it can enable growth. As for Noah, I don't think I ever loved him more than I did the day he sent my sister away. Not because he was cruel, but because he was brave enough to demand change instead of comfort. One evening, while Kyle was brushing his teeth, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Mom," he said, foam still in his mouth, "is Aunt Danny a good mom now?" I paused. "I think she's trying very hard to be," I said honestly. Kyle nodded thoughtfully. Then he said something that made my throat tighten. "She was bad that day, but she got punished, and she changed. I think that's enough." My son understood something many adults never do. Punishment isn't about revenge. It's about transformation. Today, our family isn't perfect. It never will be, but it's real. Danny still carries guilt. I still carry fear. And Kyle carries a memory he shouldn't have had to carry at 8 years old. But every Sunday, when the backyard fills with laughter again, when 2 boys chase each other under the same sky where everything almost ended, I know this. Forgiveness isn't free. Redemption isn't quick. And love doesn't mean letting people hurt you without consequence. Sometimes loving someone means pushing them so far away that they're forced to meet themselves. And sometimes they come back changed.